Hey everyone, watching live and watching the recording. We're so excited for this call because we have Skye as our special guest from Blue Dragon, and this is a cause that is so close to all of our hearts here in our community, which is freedom from human trafficking. And in the past, we've been really used to having a focus on sex trafficking, which of course is huge. It's a massive issue all around the world, and it's not just in developing and third world countries, it's in first world countries. In fact, the desire for people from first world countries wanting to participate in this is mind-blowingly sickening, and it's perpetuating the cycle and the need for sex traffickers to keep gathering to them as many people as they can to imprison and force into this industry. However, something we learned last year when we were in Vietnam, which really did, again, blow our minds, this whole industry blows our minds, was that it's not only that people are taken for sex trafficking needs, they are actually taken for other purposes. So the purpose of this call is I've asked Skye to join us and to explain more about this so that you know what is behind the heartbeat of this organization, why it was born, that inception point, and how they're going to help. And for me personally, as you know, as a woman in this world and a mother of children, I couldn't think of much worse than this, than waking up and my children not being there anymore. So, or for me not being there for my children, which you'll hear how that happens as well. So our community is very used to standing behind issues that are, I'm so sorry, I'm so emotional, I'm struggling for the words, that are big for us. And I have been with Paul looking for a cause that we can all contribute to as a family. And when we went to Vietnam, we felt like we found it just straight away. So tonight's call is going to educate you on Blue Dragon. It's also going to educate you on how we can all make a difference, because Team Alchemy and anyone, this is for everyone. They don't even have to be a customer in our team. They don't have to be running the business in our team. It can be family members, anyone who wants to put money behind a good cause. We have been approved in a match program. So we raised $10,000. That's the maximum. And they match us 10,000, but we can raise 20 or 30,000. It doesn't matter. It's just they match the first 10, right? So I'm going to ask Paul to speak a bit about our experience in Vietnam very quickly, and the way that we served and how what we raised together as a family is going to go toward so much more than we could ever have dreamed.
Yeah, so you all know that we source our essential oils all over the world, right? And Vietnam is no stranger to that. So doTERRA sources a bunch of its essential oils there as well. And wherever we go, we try and look at what, not just the situation with the growers and how we can improve their situation with our co-impact sourcing kind of mandate to provide, fair and on-time payments, look at whatever social challenges that are existing there, making sure that the workplace is safe, workplace, all those things. But we also look for our Healing Hands partners, partners that we can partner, our charity arm of Healing Hands. And Healing Hands Australia is a registered charity within Australia. So everyone who donates from within Australia can also get tax-deductible donations, or give tax-deductible donations. But when we were there, we had an opportunity to go out into the field a little bit, and we spent some time at a community garden, and we were there tilling the soil and getting ourselves dirty and kind of getting ready for the next, cultivating the soil, getting ready for the next sort of planting to be done. And we learned while we were there that this garden is the garden that feeds the people, often young people, that are rescued by Blue Dragon in Vietnam. And in the kind of the safe harbour that they have at their headquarters there's an opportunity for these children to come and, get kind of well fed and nourished from great food and those kind of things. So as we were kind of tilling the soil for a few hours and working with the locals and working with Skye and her team, we kind of learned more about Blue Dragon. Then we got to go back to their headquarters and see, the building there and what they're doing there and how much of a difference they're making. And we were obviously, as we always are, moved by these things. For me, injustice is kind of my personal code. I can't stand injustice. I don't mind if people are capable and they can, kind of fight their own good fight and they can kind of make a space in the world for themselves. But when they are unable to fight back, when they're unable to take care of themselves, that's the kind of thing that really gets my goat. So anyway, I don't want to take up all the time. I want to pass it over to Skye because we got her on as a special guest so that she can share about it. But Skye, I don't know if Vanessa's going to introduce you or not, but Skye's an Aussie. But has been living full time, in Vietnam for a number of years now, and she's been heading up this kind of amazing charity and this amazing group of people, and with a lot of locals as well, and the support they have there. But they do just such amazing work, and Skye is one of those rare people who could use her life differently and pursue personal dreams and personal outcomes like most of us do, and we have the right to do that, and we can all go and do that. But she chose to go a different path, and really she's devoting her time full time to serving a massive gap in Vietnam and around the world, where taking care of these less fortunate than ourselves. So she's just a selfless, wonderful, beautiful Aussie overseas doing what she does best. So I'll let you take over, Skye, and share what it is that you do at Blue Dragon and all the stuff we're going to get behind. And for those of you who don't know yet, we're going to be leaning into this strongly at convention in July. So Skye's going to be there. We're going to be talking a lot about it. It's our kind of premier partner for this year, Blue Dragon. And there's going to be some activations at the event, at convention, for you to come and learn more and participate and do things. And so anyway, Skye, floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that very generous introduction, Paul and Vanessa. And hello to everyone on the call. I've had the great honor of hosting quite a few doTERRA families from Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and soon to be Korea here in Vietnam. And I'm always, even though we're through a screen, I can feel all of your hearts. So thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and making time outside of your regular schedule. So I'll just share so you can. Is there anyone here who's been to Vietnam before? You can raise your real hand, no virtual hand needed. Yes, Paul and Vanessa, others? So Bridget, awesome. So I'm, as Paul said, I'm from Cairns, from far north Queensland. And I had the great opportunity to come to Vietnam back in the early 2000s. So those of you who would have visited more recently, Vietnam was a very, very different place then. My dad had a pub. He was a retired aircraft engineer and an ex-veteran. So he came back to Vietnam. He was working here for an airline and just fell in love with the country in the late 90s. And he decided to retire here and bought a pub. And so after I graduated university, I popped in to see him. I was in the region, and within 2 weeks, I had completely fallen in love with Vietnam. I went home, I packed up all of my art school belongings, like an old Mitsubishi van that I sold for $500, and I came back to Vietnam, and that was the beginning of an incredible destiny, a path that I didn't know where it was leading back then, but definitely know where it was leading nowadays. So back in those days here in Hanoi, you would see street kids everywhere. They would be usually boys from very poor communities in the villages surrounding Hanoi. And they would be dropping out of school because of poverty and migrating to the city to make money to send back to their families to keep their siblings in school and help their families. They'd be carrying little wooden boxes around the street saying, shoe shine, or selling postcards, trying to sell them to tourists around one of the main tourist lakes here. So in those days, the founder of Blue Dragon, I'm not the founder, just one of the very early volunteers, The founder is Michael Brzezowski, and Michael was here as a teacher at the Economic University. And he was sitting on a sidewalk cafe. There's sidewalk cafes everywhere in Hanoi, having his morning coffee. And a boy named V walked past with his little wooden box, and he looked at Michael and he said, "Shoe shine." That was the pivotal moment that started the seed of Blue Dragon. So Michael, as a teacher, couldn't let this boy walk past without offering something back to him. So of course he accepted the shoe shine, which I think would have been like 20 cents back then. And he also brought breakfast for the boy, and in his broken English offered to teach him broken Vietnamese. His English is very good. Broken Vietnamese offered to teach English to V. V had been on the streets for many months already, and when Michael said that to him, he saw the opportunity to change his life. He didn't want to be on the streets. It was dangerous. It was difficult. So he came back every morning, day after day after day, to meet Michael, have breakfast, learn more English, so that he could sell more postcards to the foreigners, because back then everyone used USD still. And that one boy grew to a group of 5 boys, 10 boys, 15 boys. And soon the cafe owner kicked them out because they're like, my cafe's full of street kids, this is bad for business. And so, at this point, Blue Dragon was like, okay, we need to do something more organized here because there's so many children who need help. And back then, Vietnam was still very much a developing country, and their child protection systems and their society's view of street kids was very different. And at that time, there were no other organizations working with this group of kids. They were falling through the gaps. They had no legal papers, no parents that they were living with to protect them because they were all in the villages. And so as we got to know these group of kids, we realized how complex the issue actually was. So since those very early days, we still continue our work with street kids. So this is, a very typical scene back in the early days with kids sleeping on bridges or under bridges or in trees. Now you don't see them as much anymore. They're more well hidden in internet cafes and construction sites, etc. But since those early days, we've helped over 2,600 kids on the street get home safely to their families and help them to rebuild their lives. And our work with street kids has been pivotal because in working with those kids, we then met another child in another city who we discovered had been trafficked from central Vietnam, from a very poor fishing village, into Ho Chi Minh City to sell flowers on the street. And when we met him, his name is Ngop, we discovered that all the kids that he was with, who were sitting on the street selling flowers, would work 17 hours a day doing that all through the night and never go to school. They came from a really rural fishing area in central Vietnam. So poor. In Australia, it would be prime real estate beachfront, but in Vietnam, where they live is in shacks. There's no floor. It's just all sand. The closer you are to the ocean, the poorer you are here. And what we discovered by meeting Ngop and calling his family and going to his village, we discovered that many, many children from these villages were gone. They were in Saigon going to school with another family. So what traffickers were doing were coming into these poor fishing villages where many of the people were illiterate. They only knew what they knew, and offering for one of their children to have a better life, to come to Ho Chi Minh City, to live with their family. They would send them to school. The traffickers even put the kids in school uniforms and stood them out at the front of the school and took photos and then posted them back, because this is the early days before smartphones, posted those photos back to the village. So then all the parents would start to trust, oh, this is great, their child is going, so maybe my child can go. And in the evenings, they were told that their children would help with the family business. So also they would send a little bit of money back to a few families who could paint their house or buy a TV. And of course, in the village where you only know what you know, you start to trust these opportunities for your children. Many of the families there have nothing. And when they agree for their child to go, it's just a better option than the terrible options that they have. But when we started on this, even the local authorities were like, that's not happening. Children don't get trafficked from here for child labor. And so we went child by child, house by house, and found families with kids that were in Ho Chi Minh City. And we worked with the family to try and locate the children. We took local authorities from that province to Ho Chi Minh City, and we worked on 2 issues of child labor there. One was children on the street selling flowers and chewing gum. They were being controlled by pimps. And the other group were being trafficked directly into these sweatshops that are like in someone's house. So they're like the middle contractor. So they'll do a piece of the product. And these kids there would work day and night with 1 meal. They weren't allowed to call home. They were beaten. You know, we have so many photos of garment factories that we've raided together with local authorities to get kids home. And the kids are like, you know, colorless and just skinny and tiny from 10 to 12 to 14 years old. So in working on this issue, you know, at a time where Vietnam really wasn't acknowledging domestic trafficking, so we had to call it just child labor, but there's a much bigger picture there. You know, our lawyer who was working on this issue, the first time he was working with authorities, bringing people home, sorry, not with authorities, visiting families, he was arrested because they're like, what are you doing like focusing on this issue? And nowadays, after rescuing nearly 300 kids from this form of trafficking and protecting those communities, whenever he has time, which is rare, and he's in Hue, you know, it's like so much respect is shown to him for the difficult issue that he represented and pointed out for Blue Dragon. Over the years, so that first rescue happened in 2005. So up until in 2018, we've stopped rescuing children from that form of trafficking. So it takes a long and committed effort. So we don't only rescue, but then working with the community, the families and the authorities to even understand, you know, what child protection is, what child labor is, what's happening in their communities. And from this time, we learned so much about what does and doesn't work to end human trafficking. And so that then combined with the next call for help, which was another street girl that we knew here in Hanoi. Her name was Ba, and she lived in the slum area, and she had disappeared for 6 months in 2007, and we hadn't heard from her at all. Her family hadn't heard from her. And then one day her mum got a call saying, "Mum, I'm in a brothel in China. Please help me." And so, as I mentioned, you know, 2007 in Vietnam, we were all on the little Nokia phone. So there was no location or anything. All she could tell us is what she could see out of the window. She knew she was in China, not so far from the border to Vietnam, but no idea where. And at that time, we went around to many agencies, government, non-government, other charities, but no one had done it before. And without a location, it was very, very complicated for an authority to say, oh, okay, well, we will start this, you know, bilateral process with the government of that other country to go in and try and rescue this person. So it hadn't been done before. But at Blue Dragon, we treat every child like our own. You know, what would you do for your own daughter? So we decided at least we can drive in there and try and locate where she is. If we can find a location, then we can get help to do the rescue. So our wonderful team drove into China. So for Vietnamese people with the Chinese border, there's like a free travel corridor in the south of China. So Vietnamese people can move freely in and out of the country. And they ended up finding Ba based on what she could see out the window. And they came home with 7 Vietnamese girls from that brothel. And after that, I cut the story really short there. It's quite complex and a lot happened in those 3 days of that rescue. But when they got back, it was like, well, we were never going to do that again. That was wild. And like, she's home now, and hopefully we never have to do that again. And then the Vietnamese police reached out to us because they too were receiving these calls from Vietnamese girls and women who were trapped in brothels, forced marriages in China, and they didn't know how to rescue them. So because of our care for one child and then working out the problem around them, we kind of, you know, stumbled into this cross-border rescue work together with the Vietnamese authorities. And basically from 2007 until COVID, that was the main form of trafficking that we were working on. So Vietnamese girls and women, usually from very poor and remote areas or low education, who are being trafficked from every single province in Vietnam, and there's 62 provinces, into China. So going from the south of Vietnam, going more on promises of work, from the north of Vietnam, where we, you know, share a very big border with China, going from promises of work or being groomed by a lover who then tricks them and takes them on a date and crosses the border. And it was, yeah, we were rescuing, like, first started slowly as the numbers grew, you know, 50, then 100, 150, 200 girls and women a year from this form of trafficking. And because of the one-child policy in China, where many girls were aborted and boys were the preferred child, if you could only have one child, to carry on the family name in the traditions and cultures in China, there's a massive gap of girls to men there. So this was like feeding this demand for girls and women to marry, even though never legally married, but forced into marriage to bear children to carry on the family line. And then, of course, sex work, there was a huge gap because there's not enough girls and women. So what happened normally when a girl crossed the border, they were passed hands from the person that they trusted, and locked up and given, you know, 3 options. You either marry a Chinese man, or you work in a brothel, or we'll kill your family. So, you know, we can't even imagine the level of terror in that moment when you realize that you have lost all control over your life. So from, you know, the majority of rescues that we did were about 70% from forced marriages, because a lot of women would choose the less of all evils, thinking only one man instead of 20 men a day. But what we saw is that a lot of abuse and exploitation, women would be locked up in the house until they fell pregnant. If the husband couldn't get her pregnant, then the uncle or the grandfather, anyone, to try and impregnate this woman from their line. So when a woman would be able to get their hand on a phone, they would call for help. And usually they remember their mum's number, of course. The one number you should always remember. And so at that point, you know, either the family has already reported their daughter missing, or they haven't heard from her for a very, very long time. Maybe she's really busy with her job, like all kinds of different things that happen. But when they call for help, it triggers a whole response from the family to the police to Blue Dragon. And so in those very early days, we were involved in many, many cases, and always mentoring police and authorities and border guards on how to deal with trafficking cases, because they're very difficult to prove in the court of law. So all of our work from that first call of help, we're representing the victim, guiding them to escape, to get to the closest port of law that can protect them. And then once they're able to return home, we provide emergency support and care for them. We have psychologists and lawyers in our team, help them to work with the police, and then reunite with their family when they're safe. And then, you know, the healing process begins and the long recovery. So I just want to tell you a story about Hank, because this incredible woman sticks in my heart. And tomorrow I get to be a part of an interview with her for a scholarship to study English in Australia. But Hank was 14 when she left home with a promise of work. So she grew up in a family with a single mum who lived in absolute poverty. And her mum was struggling to keep her in school. And here in Vietnam, the school fees are, like, for us, are very, very small. You know, a few $100s a year can keep a child in school. But for someone who lives in abject poverty, it's just not possible. So Hank's mum was struggling, and Hank really wanted to help her. And a person that she trusted, a friend, said, we can get a job in China. It pays this. It's really great. You can go and work there and help your family. So Hank dropped out of school. She didn't tell her mum. She traveled far away. She'd never left her hometown. So trusted this person, ended up across the border in China, and then sold into a forced marriage at 14. She was sold 3 times because, you know, she was so defiant and didn't want to comply with the family and couldn't get pregnant. So the family sold her on. And by her 3rd place of slavery, Hank was 19, and she just absolutely couldn't bear it anymore. So she actually took all the courage that she had to escape, and she jumped out of a 2nd-story building to do that. That was her only hope. She wasn't able to call for help at any stage of her period in slavery. However, it was where she hoped to land, she didn't make it. She landed on the cement. And when she woke up, the family had dragged her back into the house, and she didn't receive medical care for more than 6 months. And she was there with a spinal injury whilst they continued to try to impregnate her. So finally, they took her to a hospital because obviously her health was declining rapidly. And in that, like, this girl's incredible. In that moment, knowing she was going to the hospital, she reached out to her doctor, and she screamed and made the biggest fuss until they believed her with the basic Chinese that she had, that she was a victim of human trafficking. And so that then triggered, we got the call, Vietnam police got the call, and it triggered a whole response to get Hank home. She needed to stay there for treatment for some months, but eventually we were able to bring her home. And, you know, we can't imagine what those 5 years were like for her, and the years that came as she had to adapt to, you know, living with a physical disability. She's got a spinal injury that affects her from the waist down. She works for an IT company. She's a content writer now. She leads the team. She's learned how to live independently. She's an advocate for other people with disabilities. She's the most incredibly courageous young woman. So a lot of people ask us, like, how do you do this day in and day out? I'm like, people like Hank, like, look at this. Imagine if we didn't rescue her. Imagine if we didn't go through the difficulty to get her home, what would her life be? So there's like thousands of stories I could tell you, but it's pretty hard to hear. So I just really wanted to share that with you. And for Blue Dragon, we don't have a list of services where, like, okay, you come in here and then you receive this, 6 months pass, and then you're exited from the program. Depending on each child, each young person that we meet, each adult, depending on what they've been through, what their whole background story is, what their road ahead of them is, will adapt to whatever their needs are. So, you know, we have psychologists, as I mentioned. We've had to develop, 20 years ago in Vietnam, you know, psychology was only taught as educational psychology in the university. Still, it's just starting to change into clinical practice here. So we had to bring in expertise from outside the country to teach us about how to work with trauma and, you know, other psychological interventions to work with survivors. So we really grew our practice organically around every child we met as well, which makes us quite unique and very, very specialized to helping Vietnamese survivors of human trafficking who are trafficked to certain forms of slavery in Vietnam and across the borders. So these days it's much easier. We have smartphones, and so our rescue team will receive calls for help, however triangulated in the way that they come. And we're able to ask the victim to send a location and try and get a photo of their husband's ID card. So this is the China rescues. This particular rescue, you can see the pin is in the middle of a lake. This woman was actually trafficked into a forced marriage and was trapped on a boat in the middle of a lake. It took us 2.5 years to work out a plan to get her out, because with our rescue, it's very subtle and non-confrontational. So the trafficker or the person who's holding them in slavery don't even know that they've gone. So the time that they, it's really working with them and waiting for the victim to call us, because if we call them, they could be found out that they're calling for help or that they've gotten a phone. So these days it's much easier as far as locating. We don't have to rely on what people can see outside the window. As many of you know, China is huge, and also the other countries in the region where we're now trafficking, rescuing people from. So we face significant changes. We're very agile here at Blue Dragon. We're always like adapting to the new trends and new issues, with street kids. It goes from gangs to drugs to pedophiles to this, and we need to adapt and ensure our practice is responsive to that and protecting people. With human trafficking during COVID, China built a massive security fence along their southern border, across their whole southern border, so across Vietnam and Laos and Myanmar. So it was under their zero COVID policy, which stopped movement of people, but also a part of their policy to crack down on organized crime. So it disrupted easy movement across illegal border crossings that would happen between communities, because it's just all mountains up there. So that happened and slowed down that form of trafficking of girls and women into forced marriages and brothels. But that form of trafficking still happens because Vietnamese people can cross legally at a border crossing. So traffickers have to adapt the way that they bring people in. But it definitely disrupted it and changed the whole landscape that we work in today. So Vietnam is bordering the ocean, and you can see there's Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Myanmar, and China up the top. So what happened during COVID, while the whole world went online and people were stopped from moving around, these Chinese criminal gangs also went online. And so they discovered this multi-billion-dollar industry of online scamming. So in the regional countries, there are autonomous zones that are like leaseholds for like 100-year leasehold to a Chinese gang, and they'll build up whole cities there that had casinos for Chinese people to come down and gamble, because they can't gamble in China. These casinos were turned into scam compounds, so everyone's sitting there with computers, being forced to scam people online. And then in those enclaves, there's also brothels and other things that provide services to the people in those compounds. You can see where Laos, Myanmar, and Thailand join. There's a renowned area there called the Golden Triangle. That's another autonomous area that's run by drug lords and gangs. And there's a lot of scam factories there. And also down in Cambodia, right down in the south there, there's huge compounds. So what we saw is this significant shift to suddenly people calling for help from inside scam compounds. And we're like, what are these scam compounds? And we very, very quickly learnt that people were being offered jobs. So if you're looking online for a job, and post-pandemic, everyone was suffering financially and economically. So if you wanted a job, and here in Vietnam, everyone's online. It's not like in Australia where you got to go sit at McDonald's just to get the Wi-Fi. Everyone has like 4G here. In the mountains, in the most rural areas, everyone is online. So all you need to do is type something in, and someone within minutes will be like, yeah, I've got a job for you. I'll pick you up. All you need is your ID and no skills, $500 a month, which is a very good salary here for someone who's not educated. So there was this massive shift where suddenly there were people being forced into criminality in these compounds. So they would go thinking that they're going to some hospitality job or some legit IT job, and they would be held captive in these compounds and forced to sign like a liability contract, and then forced to scam at least five people a month. And if they didn't meet their quota, then they would be tortured with like electric cables and rods, threatened with death. So that was the way that traffickers create fear, so no one tries to escape or no one tries to call for help. And if people really wanted to go home, then they would demand that their family pays a ransom of maybe $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to get their child back, or their husband back, or their wife back. And for poor families, it's just like, it's an impossible amount of money. So this is inside the scam factories. Some scam factories is what it looks like. They're very, very sophisticated. There's psychologists there helping to build the scams. Like there's a whole network and about 40 different nationalities who are trafficked in, because they want people from the home country to be able to, so Vietnamese people to scam Vietnamese people, Kenyans to scam Kenyan people. So there's a real mix of nationalities who are in there. This is just, so when this issue first started ramping up, there was a big escape of 42 Vietnamese people who swam across the river to escape from Cambodia, because they're right in the border. And a 16-year-old boy was killed in that process by the compound security guards who are wheeling all kinds of weapons. And that created a huge spark here in Vietnam. We see really great efforts by the Vietnamese government in ending human trafficking. And when this new form kind of blew up and then suddenly calls for help from everywhere, they were really responsive in education campaigns. So we worked together, how do we stop people from going at the same time as rescuing them? So we went from, rescuing girls and women to then suddenly getting calls like this, please help my sister. She's in Myanmar and the trafficker plans to take her kidneys. I'm desperate. All night I hear bombs and gunfire. I don't want to keep living. So in Myanmar, when the civil war broke out, literally there's gunfire in the streets. One female survivor, we rescued her. She had a bullet in her lung. It was a very tricky and difficult rescue to get her out and get her home safely, and she's alive and well. But the levels of violence and brutality that we are seeing in these forms of trafficking is next level, particularly in the brothels that are associated to these kind of enclaves, are just awful. Girls are locked in rooms and basically, made compliant with the use of drugs and then made dependent to survive the horrendous services that they have to provide. So when people can, they try to get home. They try to reach out for help. There's a letter here that I just wanted to throw in because, often we get the calls for help either from the family or from the police. But, the thing that stands out, this is a thank you letter from one of the fathers, that he says, for 188 days last year, my daughter and I, so the family as well, endured a nightmare. So imagine receiving calls for help or messages when your daughter can get a phone and not being able to do anything. So I think for Blue Dragon, we really understand how trafficking not only destroys the person who's experienced that slavery, but how it destroys the family and then the community, particularly communities that are very vulnerable. And we see that here. There are whole provinces where communities live in such poverty and because of different reasons, a very low level of education, because of the terrain of where they live, or simply, just because they're generations of poverty, they're unable to grow enough food to live. So they have to take opportunities in hope for a better life. And if they don't, then, what happens there? They just die and suffer there. So there's this incredible spirit in Vietnamese people that I find that despite the hardship, there's so much resilience and work ethic to do something to help the family, whatever it is. So we've really taken, everything we do on the front line, we feed up into the legal system. So we provide victim representation from rescue through to the court process. So Blue Dragon's represented 30% of the human trafficking cases in the country. So that's a huge percentage. Our lawyers, I see him in the office for maybe, I don't know, one day every 2 months. He's always on the move, picking up, meeting survivors at border gates and representing them in courts all across the country. Because justice, as Paul said, that's the game changer. If at least there's justice, we can't take away what's happened, but we can seek some justice and some part of the healing for the person who's been a victim of that crime, and also create consequences and awareness so that other people will think twice before they're offered to like bring a girl here and you'll make $1,000. So like it's so important that the judicial system is keeping up and adapting to the changes in trafficking and the issues that happen. So when the scam compounds blew up, we were rescuing people from there. And we represented the victim in some of the very first court cases on that type of trafficking in forced criminality. And the Vietnamese government had that court case shown in 100 courts across the country for 100 judges, so they could learn how to prosecute those cases. So we see like, you know, all of these things happening at once. And then at the same time, we're so like, you know, our mission is to end human trafficking. We want to stop it before it starts because we see the suffering, we see the devastation. So we work these orange spots. So Vietnam is a very interesting context, particularly for an international NGO like Blue Dragon. You know, it is a socialist, communist country. So there's different ways that they work with international agencies, and we're very governed and work in partnership with the government. So we have license to operate in these areas in the orange, so right up on the northern border where those communities, you know, are going to China all the time or Laos. They're right on the border. It's an easy cross. They're very vulnerable. We work in Hanoi, meeting kids as soon as we have a team out every night here on the streets trying to meet kids as soon as possible before they're exposed to harm, or we're meeting them after they've been trafficked or exploited. And so helping to get support for them and work out what's happening, work with their family and help their family to be able to care for them if they can, or helping them to get jobs and start to break the cycle of poverty. We also work in central Vietnam, Nghệ An and Hue. They're two huge hotspot areas. We've just started working in Ho Chi Minh City. It's the biggest city in Vietnam. And something that's striking when you go to Ho Chi Minh City these days, there's kids on the street everywhere, families on the street everywhere. So the south of Vietnam is being affected a lot by climate change, and there's a lot of climate migration, but also migration from the Mekong Delta area was very poor, has been happening for many years. So many people are living in poverty and ending up on the streets in Ho Chi Minh City. And we're just also starting down in Bac Lieu, where we've rescued many, many people from trafficking. So we try to work with the provincial governments in those provinces to end trafficking. So we very aligned mission. They acknowledge that it's happening and we work together on ending that. So there's a lot of awfulness to the work that we do, but also a lot of hope and a lot of joy. And some of my favorite memories are, you know, when I've met kids or mums or, you know, men, is when you see the light come back into their eyes. And it's a significant, it's just like you see it and you know that, you know, the light's starting to filter back in and their healing process has started. So we do that in many ways. We have a psychology team who are providing, you know, trauma-informed care and also trauma treatment. We feed the kids who we support in our shelters and our center here in Hanoi every day. I think Paul and Vanessa, we might have already harvested and eaten the crops that you contributed to. We have a learning center. We have about 80 volunteers who are supporting to bridge the gap of learning loss during the time of slavery or being on the street, to help get kids back up to be able to go back to school, or helping adults, particularly from ethnic minority backgrounds, to build up their literacy in the majority Vietnamese language so that they can enter vocational training. We have a careers team who are working on jobs. Juggling, we juggle. When everything gets too tough, we juggle. We have all kinds of things depending on the people that we're helping, and giving them an opportunity to find something that they're good at or to have confidence in. So we have circus and hip hop and drama and arts and skateboarding and all kinds of things. And that changes over time depending on the kids that we're caring for. And then we work at a very grassroots level in those communities, in those areas, the yellow parts on that map. So we work with village leaders, local authorities, parents, to teach them what trafficking actually is, because it manifests in different ways in different communities. So you really need to know how it's happening and the consequences of it in order to prevent it. And then we support the system. So the government system, it's like we're jump starting a car, like all the parts are there and all the parts might work really well on their own, but like helping to connect them and make the system work really well by filling it with our expertise and our resources and collaboration to help these provinces end human trafficking. We keep a lot of kids in school. So a lot of that prevention work is to keep kids in school here in Vietnam, particularly in the provincial areas and ethnic minority communities. Probably about 70% of kids drop out by grade 9 because they, what are the job opportunities? The families can't afford the tiny amount of money to keep them in school, so they need their children to go and work. Girls in particular, so there's still early marriage practices in some ethnic communities. So we try to stop, work at that very grassroots level to prevent things from happening, keep kids in school, build up career opportunities, work with the local economy so that there's jobs in the local area so people don't have to migrate. We help families with livelihoods so they don't have to migrate for work. On and on it goes. It's a whole ecosystem that we're a part of and we work on strengthening. There's been many a cows, many a pigs, many a chickens and porcupines over the years. So I just want to, sorry, I've given you a lot of information, but I just want to share May's story and then maybe we can open up for questions if people have that, because it's a lot to take in. But May's story kind of encapsulates, Blue Dragon and why we're here and what we're aiming for. So May is, she's Hmong. She's from a tiny village in Hazang province, which borders China. And she had 2 small children with her husband, and he ended up in prison for a crime that he was involved in. And she was left with, only one person trying to work and look after her children. She was living with the elderly grandparents, parents-in-law, and it was very difficult. They were also very, very poor. Her children didn't have any legal paperwork, so they weren't in school, and of course, no money to send them. So one of May's friends offered her a job in China. And so, someone that she trusted, it's always someone that they trust, took her there and sold her into a forced marriage. She left, this is her kids now after rescue, but her kids were much smaller at the time that she was trafficked. I think 3 and 4. And she was in slavery for 2 years. And in China, they were doing a sweep through all of the houses to see if there's any illegal migrants, and May was there enslaved, so they took her out, and together then with the Vietnamese authorities and Blue Dragon were able to repatriate her and bring her home. But because her husband had been in prison, there was so much stigma around her in the village that no one wanted anything to do with her, even the parents-in-law. So she and her children were sleeping under a rain tank. So, like on like a frame, and then the rain tank's up high. So they were sleeping underneath and living under there until someone in the community said, this isn't okay. And so we had just briefly known about them, but our system in the community had identified her and then reached out for extra support. So now May and her beautiful little children have their own home. The local government gave them land on the edge of the community so they weren't heavily affected by the stigma. They have their own house. She has chickens to raise. She also is connected with a weaving co-op. And so she weaves every night in her home while her kids are asleep. She's close enough to the school so she can walk them there and pick them up in the afternoon and bring them home. And May wove her first piece of their beautiful, traditional weaving up north. She wove her first piece of fabric and it sold at the co-op for 6 million Vietnam dong, which is 400 Aussie dollars. She had never, ever, 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 ever imagined an amount like that in her life. And when I asked her, I was like, May, what did you do with that? That must have been so exciting. You know, she was so humble and lovely. She bought rice, she bought, you know, school books for her kids. She did this, that, and then she kept an amount of money to buy more yarn so she could weave the next piece that would then, you know, generate income for her. And so, you know, we support May long-term together with the local agencies in her village. And it's just incredible to see her thrive after all of the hardship that she's been through, and that she has hope for the future and hope for her children. So, you know, whilst we're on the front line of all of this happening, there's so many stories of hope and resilience. And because we work in the legal framework of trafficking, we represent victims, we're feeding things into the court, we can see the things that are working now to end human trafficking. So we're really trying to create a model that can be replicated and tailored to different provinces where trafficking manifests differently, and partner with the local government and local communities to end trafficking for good, the major forms of trafficking here in Vietnam. So in a nutshell, I don't even know how long that was. That's Blue Dragon. Oh, here's some numbers. This is just a snapshot of what we've done so far. Yeah, so we've rescued nearly 2,000 people from trafficking. Just last month, we rescued 43 people coming out of Myanmar because of the devastating earthquake that happened there last month. Traffickers were starting to leave compounds, so people were able to escape. Last month, we walked a lot of people back from Myanmar through Laos back to Vietnam. So those numbers, our data goes out of date so quickly. We're constantly helping and supporting new people. But in our prevention work, we reach more than 40,000 people a year through that prevention work, through schools, through communities, to prevent human trafficking from happening. I think do we want to open up for questions, or how would you like to move forward?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Skye. That was great.
We'll come back in a second, but does anyone have any questions you'd like to just open up and unmute yourself and just come on and ask?
Tracy's saying, when did you say you began with Blue Dragon, Skye?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I began as a volunteer in 2003, and every year I came and volunteered and contributed in different ways. As the organisation grew and I grew, then we came back together. But I've been here full time since 2015, so I've just passed 10 years. And I'm a social worker by trade.
And you what?
I'm a social worker by trade.
Yeah. And then when did Blue Dragon actually open up?
So Blue Dragon, like the founding days were in 2003, and we were officially registered as an organisation in 2004.
Right.
Well,
and
you're
then
kind of an honorary founder.
Yeah, you
since
really
the
are.
beginning.
And then Lisa says, what happens to the traffickers?
Nothing bad enough, Lisa.
Maybe let's stop screen sharing if you like, and then we can all see each other on the screen.
Yeah. So stop share. We back?
Yeah, we're back. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. So it's I'm not going to say it in a nutshell. So because in order to stop human trafficking, we also need to understand the factors that contribute to people becoming traffickers. So, you know, prior to COVID, because we have a lot of court databases and information from the cases that we've represented, we also have that data on traffickers. And what we saw is that their profiles is like the same as a victim, you know, ethnic minority or very disadvantaged background, low levels of education, opportunistic, you know, something's happened in the family where there's a debt or someone's become unwell and they're needing to, you know, get quick money. And in those cases, it was usually males that were traffickers, but there's more females as traffickers now. So what happens is the victim can usually remember the person who they built trust with, you know, who they have their contact with. So usually when a trafficking case comes into investigation, then those people who are able to be identified as the traffickers will then be prosecuted. So if a child, so in Vietnam, the child law is up to the age of 16. So if a child is trafficked, usually the charge can be 20 years in prison. but for an adult, it's much less. So it usually ranges from 4 to 8 years, depending on how many people they've trafficked or the circumstances around it, etc. So yeah, so every person we rescue, we try to push it through the legal system. The police will do the investigation part and decide whether that case will go to court or not.
Does anyone else have a question they'd like to ask at all? Or please feel free to.
Thanks for being here, Kim, as well.
Yeah, we see Kim who's heading up Healing Hands in our corporate office on the call. So thank you for coming. You know, we launched this call without much notice, and it's not on the time or day of our normal team call. But Vanessa just commented while Skye was talking that we wish that we had more of our team on, and I was reminded that it's something that I remember from a movie that I watched many years ago. Many of you would have seen the movie The Power of One. And one of the core moments, the guy is looking for some inspiration. He's looking for some clarity on a situation. And he goes for a walk in nature and he sees this massive waterfall. And shortly after, he's approaching the professor, who is the father of a young girl that he would like to take out and escort to kind of an event. And he wasn't given the blessing because he's not from the sort of quite the right class, but he was talking about change and things like that. And he said that every waterfall begins with just one drop of water. And, we're on this call, the drop of water that can make a difference within our doTERRA community to Blue Dragon and to help Skye. So Skye, I think, represents that the best part of humanity that lives inside of all of us, but maybe doesn't come out to play enough. And obviously for someone like Skye, she plays that game full time. But it also makes me, so proud that someone from our area of the world, the Australia, New Zealand kind of area, is out there doing this in that environment. And kind of being the emissary of hope from our part of the world to an area that obviously is, for so many people, it must be like it's devoid of hope every day. Those people that have been trafficked, those kids, as a man kind of listening to all this, I feel like I see it and feel it differently to the way a woman might. It's obvious that women are going to be compassionate to this. They're the mothers, they're the caregivers. And probably not. So probably I'm experiencing it a little bit differently, but it makes me angry, actually. But I also feel like, I looked at that map that Skye showed, the orange spots are the ones that they're working in. What struck me most was how much blue there was left. And how much is still to be done. And that's in one country around the world. But it is a country that we source some of our great essential oils from. We get cassia and ginger and litsea and star anise from there. It is a place that we are connected to long term for our doTERRA business and for the beautiful products that we get from the essential oils and the harvesting that's done by the growers there. So I feel like this is just an amazing opportunity for all of us, that if we can't be Skye, then how can we fuel Skye's efforts? How can we make sure that, more and more is done? And how can we fund that significantly so that, big things can get done? Because there's a lot of blue left and there's a lot of orange problems in those blue areas. And Skye could just, I just feel like if we can create an amazing uplift in funding for them, then they're going to be able to do more good, and all of us can feel like we've contributed in some small way to that. But we all, whether you have children or not on this call, or whether you're watching this recording later, and whether you have children of your own or not, I feel it as a father of a son and a daughter, what it might be like. I couldn't imagine having been taken away from my kids when they were 3 and 4 and not to come back to them. And who would be looking after them and what that might look like, let alone whatever I might have been being subjected to while I was taken away. But that's what's before us. So, and we can make a difference, right? So whether it's a tax deductible donation or not, whatever country you're in, whoever that you can kind of bring to this cause, it's kind of irrelevant, because we can all afford to, go to the movies and you know, buy new pairs of shoes whenever we want. That's not tax deductible.
Yeah.
But that small kind of amount of money that we spend each day on a daily basis, even though we all have our own problems, we all have our own challenges, but none of our problems and challenges are on the scale of the challenges and problems that people that Skye was sharing about on this call.
Yeah.
So I feel like for all of us, you know, that $5, that $20, that $50, that $100, and for those of us who have more resources, that 500, that 5,000, you know, can make a massive difference. Vanessa's got a little list here she's going to share with you right now. What $1 or $5 or $10 or $100 could do, and how much of an impact that can make. And if we all see ourselves as that one drop of water that begins the waterfall, we're all part of a community. Every one of us is connected to a community that the rest of us doesn't know. So it's not just our doTERRA community, and let's not leave this, you know, like so many of the problems in the world, it's too much left to too few. Right.
So true.
But this is a way that we can play the game. You know, we can participate and we can make a difference. So anyway, Vanessa's going to share a little bit.
Let me share. I'll just respond to this. Trace, you've said, is doTERRA going to set up a 25 club towards this charity? We don't need to, because this is the match program. So it all just goes through this. And the link I'm going to send you is one that doTERRA has set up, which is specifically for just straight out donations. Then I'm also in the process of finishing a recipe book that's going to go out, and people can choose what they want to pay for it. It's one of my ebooks. It's huge. It's normally something I'd give free, but I'm asking for donations, and 100% is going to this. So I've got a few things in the pipe works for that, but I just want to give you an idea of how far this goes, because some people feel like they can't do much. I've only got to spare $5 a week. How's that going to make a difference? But let me tell you, it will. So I'll make sure I get this out to you all as well. But $1 gives a warm meal or gives a chick or a duckling. This is USD. $10 provides a child with psychological counselling to heal from trauma. $15 keeps a child in school for a month, and it can help buy children's school supplies. $20 gives a night of emergency shelter with clothing and meals. It can also pay a medical visit for a child. $50 provides carer training workshop, and it provides a group like wellbeing therapy type session. $100 is providing vocational training for a young adult. $150 keeps a child in school for a year. $300 starts a farm or a small business. Can you even fathom this? $150 gives a child the gift of education. $300 gives that family a small business or a farm. $500 provides lunch for all the kids at the Blue Dragon Centre for 1 month. That's $500. $1,000 launches a rescue operation. $5,000 builds a house, and $10,000 sets up and runs an anti-human trafficking board to protect the whole community from human trafficking. So even though we're at a 10,000 match, we are passionate about let's go beyond that 10,000. doTERRA will match that first 10,000, but let's go beyond. Let's give Skye and the team as much as we can. The first thing the boys said while they were gardening was, these guys need a rotary hoe.
We need a petrol
We're doing everything by
to
hand.
do this, because you know, we were hacking, and honestly, even the tools guys that these poor guys are using, it's really rudimentary, right? Like, I mean, you know what? Everyone here knows what a pick looks like, or what a hoe looks like, and this is kind of like a piece of metal, a flat piece of metal, somehow connected to a stick of bamboo. That's what you're using, right? When you're here working side by side. And, you know, so we did it. And of course, you know, we, slid our hands up and down the bamboo, and where the bamboo joins the next piece of bamboo, you got blisters and you cut your hands and all the things. And I was so happy to be bleeding and have my calluses raised back on the hands. I thought this is awesome. And you know, sweating in pretty awesome humidity and heat, and
if you get an experience to go, you got to go.
And it was just fantastic to do that. But you know, whatever it is that kind of, you know, Skye and her board feels like where is the greatest need at the time, you know, is where this will all end up. But you know, I have just full faith that it's going where it needs to go.
Yeah.
And the education piece struck me when you talked about May and those two little kids. It's like, if kids can go to school, they get opportunities. They think differently. They're created into different human beings by the opportunity that education gives. So they're less likely to end up in this situation. And so this is part of how we can break the cycle. Education breaks the cycle. And just the opportunity that we have before us to make a little difference here is really huge. If it's one child that is saved, it's enough, right? If it's one, it's enough. Whatever we can do, whatever we can raise, if it's 20, 30, 40, 50, $100,000, if that's the price of saving one, it's worth it. Right.
And also remember, so what I want to put out there for you all is this: we do events everywhere, all over the countries of New Zealand and Australia and all around the world for free, right? We're providing amazing essential oil education. So my invitation to you is you can still keep doing that. However, why don't we change it to a by donation type situation? So you can either have raffle tickets and you can be raffling off things that you've made, or just nothing. They don't get anything for it. You just have a jar there, or a bucket where people can donate. They can do gold coin donations or more and speak to the cause. So this is an opportunity and an invitation for you to be cause-led again. You've heard the stories firsthand. You can choose any one of those stories to share, or multiple, and share why partnering with doTERRA is so powerful. We're not just selling essential oils here. It's a community people want to be part of. So when you can be cause-led, and you have all seen firsthand the impact that makes, you've seen your own uplines in Paul and I go double diamond in 1 month being cause-led, right? As we raise money for the same cause, different organizations, same cause, right? So we all know the power of leading with a cause, and I'm so proud that we have it again. So first thing, Rach got back to me today and she said, Ness, the team and I have spoken, and Balance events are about to kick off here, and this is our chosen charity. We're contributing to this. So Rach and Clint are diamond leaders in our organisation. They can choose to do anything they want, and instead they're bringing their power to partnering with us all. And that's what I'm asking for all of you to do, no matter where you are. So I have a link here right now that I'm going to share with you all, and I would love to invite you all right now you can copy and paste this link. I'm going to send stuff out to you all. Can you just click on that and make sure that that's working? But it should take you on a Healing Hands page. And so what this is the page that Kim has set up for us, because we needed to have a page where people like your accountants, doctors, surgeons, like whatever it is, teachers might want to contribute and do a donation, and it'll be like a tax deduction for them, especially because we're coming to the end of financial year. So I want you to leverage this. I want you to sell this. I want you to educate people on this, and just do for those that were there while we were touring around what we were doing, the masterclass series, just do what I did. Assume the close. Like I've always done with the oils, and like I've always done with donations. Just tell them, pull out your credit cards and tap. Do what you can, give what you can, because it's all going to make a difference. And you need to, it starts with all of you. It starts with all of you. So be the leader you want your leaders to be in your business, and also be the heart you want your community to be by giving what you can. And honestly, it doesn't matter whether it's $5 or $500 that a person gives, because everything creates a ripple of change. So there's the link that you can use for those wanting a tax deduction. We've got something else that we'll send out as well once the recipe book's done, and that will just be done via Stripe. Super simple, and people will buy that. They'll get the recipe book because they're getting something in exchange. It's not a tax deduction. They're buying a book and getting that, and then whatever they choose to pay for that book will go to Blue Dragon.
But we're going to make sure this is a super transparent process. So any Stripe kind of transactions, we're going to publish them to everybody, so you'll see that everything that is purchased or anything that anyone is engaged with, they'll see that the money was donated, and we'll post the receipt that we get when we kind of give all that money to Kim there at Healing Hands. She'll send a receipt back, and everyone will know that every single dollar has been accounted for, and that's where it goes. So
we're so excited.
that's one of the things I wanted to share. Like, that, you know, doTERRA is fairly unique in the kind of this philanthropy space, because, you know, a lot of you have probably heard about organizations that collect money and donations, and a lot of the donations kind of get soaked up in the administration of the charity. But doTERRA's owners fully fund the administration costs of Healing Hands charity throughout the world. So the owners pay personally to fund the charity. So whatever the costs are, you know, so of being registered in Australia as a registered charity organisation, whatever the costs of that are, you know, the wages of the people that work there, and all of those costs, they're all met by the owners of doTERRA. So that when we donate $1, it's Blue Dragon that gets the dollar, not 14 cents in the dollar or 32 cents or 71 cents. She gets, Skye and the team get 100% of what we donate. Now, the reason that we've decided to do this match program is because I'm all about stacking the odds in our favour in everything that we do in life. And the match program means that the dollar is not $1, the dollar is $2. So every dollar that you guys get donated for the first $10,000 is $2. So that's how we start stacking the odds in our favour. And when we talk about, you know, giving just a kid a warm meal per day, well, then every dollar you collect gives 2 kids a warm meal per the day, or it gives that one child 2 meals for the day instead of 1, which I know happens at the centre that we visited with Skye, because they don't just get fed once, right? They get to actually live like modern kind of humans and get to, when they're hungry, they can be fed, you know, and that's part of the garden that we were working in.
So Kim, my question also was the same as Tracy and Kim Rose. Is this okay for New Zealand? Can they just share this same link and then money goes into that? You're trying to unmute. It's okay. Take your time.
Yeah, I don't know. There was a bit of discussion because obviously I wasn't involved with the balance events last month, but around it's a bit different here in New Zealand. So I need to find out how it works. There was a bit of a, Tracy, do you know a bit more? I just know that there was like a bit of confusion around it.
Let's come off the recording and then we'll try and solve it. But for everyone watching the recording, I hope that this was illuminating. Skye, thank you so much for helping and supporting us with this and educating us. We're so grateful you came on this call. And let's just do our best to get the word out and raise funds. Skye, did you want to say anything to close?
Just thank you so much. It's I love listening to this discussion, and also, like, you know, like the real mission driven mindset, and which is very similar to Blue Dragon. So I just, you know, I'm so excited to be able to share our work with you and to have your support, and also anything I can do, anything our team can do. We can send you stories, we can send you materials, anything that helps in your efforts to raise money. And yeah, I think, as Paul said, I also wanted to point out, you know, every dollar raised will be going directly to helping the people that we help here.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording. Share this far and wide, everyone. And let me just stop the recording 1 second.